Ko tam chi kong kong nin thay nuoi dang koi sao long min. The sentence landed softly, but it cut through the hotel bar like cold air under a locked door. At the far end of the marble counter, Claire Whitmore sat perfectly still, one hand around a glass of ice water, the other resting near the white cane folded beside her stool. She wore a dark blue dress jacket, simple pearl earrings, and tinted glasses that caught the golden bar lights without giving anything back. Around her, men in tailored suits pretended to talk business, but their smiles kept bending in her direction. Richard Vance stood only a few feet away, polished, handsome, and empty in the way powerful men become when they mistake cruelty for confidence. "I'm only saying what the board is thinking, Claire," he said. "Whitmore Medical needs a leader who can see what's coming." A few quiet laughs slipped out. Claire did not answer. She only lifted her chin, and for one trembling second, the room mistook her silence for weakness. That was when Ethan Walker walked in. He was 38, broad-shouldered, tired in the bones, with a faded denim jacket over a clean gray shirt and work boots that did not belong on the glossy floor of the Bellamy Grand. A small tattoo showed near his right wrist when he pushed the door open. 2 words inked beneath his daughter's birthday: "Stay gentle." He had grease under one fingernail, a hospital voicemail on his phone, and exactly 48 hours to confirm the deposit for Maddie's treatment before her place on the schedule disappeared. He was not looking for trouble. He was not looking for romance. Truth be told, he was not even looking for hope. His friend had talked him into a blind date, the kind arranged by people who think a lonely man can be repaired with dinner and small talk. But the woman never showed. Ethan checked his phone once, saw no message, and gave a quiet laugh at himself. Another empty chair. Another small disappointment he would never mention to his little girl. He turned toward the bar to order a coffee, something cheap enough not to make him feel guilty, and that was when he noticed Claire. Not her cane first, not her glasses, her hand. The way her fingers held that glass too tightly, while every arrogant voice in the room tried to make her smaller. Ethan had seen that look before. He had seen it on men who had lost jobs, mothers outside emergency rooms, and his own daughter pretending she was not scared. So he stepped closer, not bold, not smooth, just tired enough to be honest. He slid onto the empty stool beside her and gave a small, crooked smile. "Let me guess," he said gently. "You're my blind date?" The bar went silent. One man nearly choked on his drink. Richard's mouth curled, ready to enjoy the damage. Ethan realized too late what he had said, and shame rushed into his face. But Claire turned her head toward his voice. No anger, no flinch, just a stillness deeper than pride. Then she said, calm as Sunday morning, "No, Ethan Walker. I'm the woman your daughter prayed for." Ethan Walker did not move at first. The words seemed to pass through the warm lights, the low music, the polished glasses, and land somewhere behind his ribs where fear had been living for months. His daughter prayed for. Not his truck, not his rent, not his tired hands. His daughter. He slowly turned his phone over on the bar, the cracked screen still glowing with the missed voicemail from Mercy Children's Hospital. "How do you know my daughter?" he asked, and his voice came out lower than he expected. Claire Whitmore folded her hands together, careful and composed, but there was nothing casual in her silence now. "Her name is Maddie," she said. "She is 9 years old. She draws horses with wings because she says regular horses should get second chances too. She wrote a letter to the Whitmore Children's Access Fund 3 weeks ago." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maddie wrote to you?" Claire nodded once. "Not to me directly. To the foundation." Richard Vance gave a small laugh behind them, the kind of laugh that tries to own a room before truth can enter it. "Claire, this is not the place." Claire did not turn toward him, then leave the room. "Richard." The quiet that followed was clean and sharp. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were strong hands, scarred by work, browned by sun, hands that had lifted engines, fixed brakes in January wind, carried a sleeping child from the couch to bed after double shifts. But suddenly they felt useless. "She was not supposed to do that," he said. "I told her we were handling it." Claire's expression softened, not with pity, but with something warmer and more dangerous to a proud man: understanding. "Children know when we are pretending." Ethan swallowed. He remembered the kitchen table 2 nights earlier. Maddie bent over a sheet of notebook paper while he packed cold macaroni into a plastic container for the next day. She had covered the page with her arm when he walked by. He thought it was homework. He should have known. Maddie had always been too quiet when she was protecting him. Claire reached into the leather bag beside her chair and placed a folded copy of the letter on the bar between them. Ethan did not touch it. He stared at it like it might break him. She did not ask us to make her life perfect, Claire said. She asked if someone could help her dad stop being tired all the time. The sentence bent his shoulders in a way Richard's insults never could. Money had embarrassed him before. Debt had cornered him. Hospital forms had humbled him. But his little girl seeing through him, seeing the weariness he hid behind jokes and burned pancakes and bedtime stories, that almost brought him to his knees. I am not a charity case, Ethan said, though the words had less iron in them now. Claire turned her face toward him, and behind the tinted glasses, he could feel her attention like a steady hand. No, she said. You are a father. There is a difference. The bar around them seemed to fade into a soft blur of amber light and murmured judgment. Ethan finally picked up the letter. Maddie's handwriting leaned crookedly across the page, big loops and uneven lines, brave in the way only a child's hope can be brave. At the bottom, she had drawn 3 stick figures, a small girl, a tall man with big shoulders, and a woman surrounded by little yellow stars. Ethan pointed at the 3rd figure, his throat tight. Who was that supposed to be? Claire gave the faintest smile. She wrote that she had not met her yet. She just believed God would send someone kind. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, Richard was watching with cold amusement, already measuring how to turn this into weakness. But Claire leaned closer, her voice gentle enough that only Ethan heard the tremble beneath it. Your daughter did not ask me to save her, Mr. Walker. She asked me to see you. Claire Whitmore left the Bellamy Grand 12 minutes after Ethan read the letter, but the sound of his silence followed her all the way up to the 40th floor. Her driver opened the town car door. Her assistant asked if she needed anything. Richard sent 3 messages before the elevator reached her penthouse, each one sharper than the last, each one pretending to be concerned while carrying the weight of a threat. Claire did not answer any of them. Inside her apartment, the city stretched beyond the glass walls in 1,000 blurred lights, red, gold, white, all softened by the damage the accident had left behind. 3 years ago, she had been able to read a contract from across a boardroom table and spot a lie before the first handshake ended. Now faces came to her in shapes and shadows. Text arrived through audio. Elevators announced floors. Her home had learned to speak because the world had forgotten how to listen. She set her cane beside the entry table, removed her tinted glasses, and stood in the quiet like a woman returning from battle without a scratch anyone could see. The penthouse was beautiful in the way money can make loneliness look intentional. Marble floors, tall windows, white orchids replaced every Monday. A piano no one played. On the kitchen counter sat a crystal bowl of fruit she never touched because it had been arranged for photographs, not hunger. Claire moved through the space by memory, 7 steps to the counter, 4 steps left, 1 hand forward before the chair. People called that brave. She called it Tuesday. Her phone rang. Richard again. She let it go once, then twice, then finally answered on speaker. You embarrassed yourself tonight, he said. No greeting, no warmth, just control wearing a tailored suit. Claire poured water into a glass, listening to the pitch change when it neared the top. I believe you did enough embarrassment for both of us. That man is a liability. That man is a father. He is a mechanic with a hospital bill and a sad story. Claire held the glass, but did not drink. Careful, Richard. You are confusing poverty with dishonor. There was a pause on the other end, the kind men use when they are deciding whether to smile or strike with words. The board vote is tomorrow. Do not give them another reason to doubt your judgment. Claire ended the call. Her hand remained above the phone for a moment, steady but cold. The truth was, the board had been doubting her for years. Not when revenue grew. Not when she saved the pediatric vision division. Not when Whitmore Medical expanded into 23 states. They doubted her after the accident, when she returned with a cane, as if sight had been the source of her mind. They began speaking louder in meetings. They stopped sliding documents toward her and started sliding them toward Richard. They said things like accessible, transition, support, legacy. Soft words. Sharp cages. Claire walked to her office and opened the audio file attached to Maddie Walker's application. The little girl's voice filled the room, small but determined. She did not ask for a miracle first. She talked about her dad burning eggs because he fell asleep standing up. She talked about him laughing when bills came so she would not cry. She talked about his tattoo and said he was gentle even when the world was not. Claire sat down slowly. The city hummed beyond the windows. For years, people had looked at Claire and seen limitation, money, power, damage, opportunity. But a child who had never met her had imagined her as someone kind. And a tired man in work boots had made a foolish joke, then looked ashamed not because she was disabled, but because he feared he had wounded her dignity. Claire touched the edge of Maddie's letter. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel like a woman being managed. She felt like a woman being called back to herself. By 9 the next morning, Mercy Children's Hospital smelled of floor cleaner, warm oatmeal, and the quiet courage of families waiting for news they could not control. Ethan Walker had been there since sunrise, sitting beside Maddie in a small exam room with pale green walls and cartoon clouds painted near the ceiling. He had not slept much. The folded copy of Maddie's letter rested in his jacket pocket like a weight and a blessing at the same time. Maddie sat on the edge of the paper-covered table, swinging her sneakers above the floor, trying to look brave in the way children do when they believe bravery will protect their parents. "You look tired, Daddy," she said. Ethan smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I am just thinking. That is what you say when bills are being mean." He laughed softly, but the laugh did not reach his eyes. Before he could answer, there was a gentle knock at the door. A nurse opened it halfway and said, "Mr. Walker, you have a visitor." Claire Whitmore stepped in wearing a cream coat, tinted glasses, and a calm expression that made the little hospital room feel suddenly too small for all the things left unsaid. Her cane touched the floor once, then again, light and precise. Ethan stood at once, not angry, not welcoming, caught somewhere between gratitude and pride. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you did not have to come here." Claire turned toward his voice. "I know." Maddie leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. "Are you the lady who sees with her voice?" The room went still. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. "Maddie," but Claire raised one hand gently, not offended. In fact, something in her face softened so deeply it almost looked like relief. "That may be the kindest description anyone has ever given me," she said. Maddie smiled. "I did not mean it weird. I just noticed you listen like my dad does when the truck makes a strange sound." Ethan gave an embarrassed breath of laughter, and for the first time since Claire entered, the tension loosened. Claire stepped closer, and Maddie held out a folded sheet of drawing paper. "I made this before I knew you were real," she said. Claire accepted it carefully, fingertips moving along the edges. "Will you tell me what is in it?" Maddie nodded with great seriousness. "It is you in a big room. Everyone else is gray, but you have yellow lines coming out of your mouth because when you talk, people finally understand where the light is." Claire did not speak. Her fingers rested on the paper as though it were something sacred. Ethan watched her turn her face slightly away, giving herself one quiet second to be human before becoming strong again. Maddie tilted her head. "I did not draw your eyes because some people look with their eyes and still miss everything. There are sentences that children say without knowing they have opened a locked door. This was one of them." Claire sat slowly in the chair beside the exam table. "Maddie," she said, her voice thinner now, but steady. "Do you know why I came?" "Because of my letter?" "Because of your letter," Claire said, "but also because your father tried very hard to make sure no one knew how tired he was." Maddie looked at Ethan with the guilty honesty of a child who had loved too loudly. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Sweetheart, you should have told me." "You would have said no," Maddie whispered. "And you always say good people should not be punished for needing help." Ethan had no answer for that. The hallway outside filled with rolling carts, soft footsteps, and a distant announcement over the speakers. But inside that room, time seemed to bow its head. Claire reached across the space, not touching Ethan, only offering the quiet dignity of choice. "I am not here to buy my way into your life," she said. "I am here because your daughter reminded me what my company was built for." Ethan looked at Maddie, then at the woman who had arrived carrying money, power, and a loneliness he understood more than he wanted to admit. "I do not know how to accept this," he said. Claire gave a small, sad smile. "Then do not accept it as charity. Accept it as one tired person honoring another." By noon, the kindness in that hospital room had already been dragged into the street and dressed up as scandal. Richard Vance moved quickly, because men like him know that a lie does not need to be strong if it gets there first. A 12-second clip from the Bellamy Grand appeared online, cut clean of context, polished with a cruel headline, and shared by strangers who had never met Ethan Walker, never seen Maddie's letter, never heard Claire Whitmore defend his dignity. All they saw was a tired mechanic smiling beside a disabled woman and saying the wrong words at the wrong time. By 1 o'clock, the clip was on local news. By 2, it had reached business channels. By 3, Whitmore Medical Systems was receiving calls from donors, board members, and people who claimed to care about respect while using outrage like a weapon. Ethan saw it on the television in the hospital cafeteria while Maddie was asleep upstairs after her tests. The screen showed his face frozen in the worst possible second, his crooked smile turned into something ugly by people who did not know his heart. A reporter said his name with a tone that made him sound like a warning. Single father accused of mocking prominent disabled chief executive officer. Ethan set down the paper cup of coffee before his hand could shake. Shame rose in him, but not because the world was angry. He could live with anger. He had lived with overdue bills, broken heaters, and winter mornings under pickup trucks when the steel was so cold it burned through gloves. What hurt was knowing Claire had trusted one quiet moment, and now that moment was being used to make her look foolish. Across town, Claire sat in the back seat of her town car while her assistant read messages from the board. The words came one after another: careful, polished, cowardly. Distance yourself. Public statement. Leadership concerns. Transition plan. Richard's name appeared beneath 3 separate emails. Never loud, never obvious. Always present like smoke under a door. They want me to deny knowing him, Claire said. Her assistant hesitated. They want you to protect the company. Claire turned toward the window, where the afternoon light broke into pale shapes against the glass. No, she said quietly. They want me to protect their comfort. At 4:15, Ethan walked into the lobby of Whitmore Medical Systems wearing his cleanest work shirt and the same boots that had crossed 1,000 shop floors. The lobby was all glass, white stone, and quiet money. People looked up from phones and conversations, then looked down at his boots, his jacket, his hands. Recognition spread in whispers. A receptionist stiffened. A security officer approached with professional politeness and a guarded face. Sir, do you have an appointment? Ethan shook his head. No, ma'am. I just need to speak with Miss Whitmore for 1 minute. 2 employees near the elevator exchanged a smile. One murmured, that is him. Another said, the bar guy. Ethan heard them. He did not turn. He had learned long ago that dignity is not the same as winning every room. I cannot let you go up, the officer said. Ethan nodded. I understand. He took a small breath, the kind a man takes before setting down pride he cannot afford to carry. Then please tell Miss Whitmore I am sorry the world made a joke out of the one moment I meant to be kind. The lobby quieted, not fully, but enough. Above him, behind a wall of tinted glass and silent cameras, Claire heard every word through the building's security feed. Richard stood beside her in the executive conference room, smiling as if the day had already belonged to him. Claire did not move. She only listened to Ethan's voice fade into the marble lobby below, and something inside her, something tired of being managed, finally stood up. Claire did not ask Richard for permission. She reached for the conference table, found the edge with practiced ease, and stood. Bring him up, she said. Richard's smile thinned. Claire, that would be reckless. No, she answered. Reckless is letting fear make decisions for people who came here to heal children. 5 minutes later, Ethan Walker stepped out of the elevator onto the 32nd floor, where the air smelled faintly of sanitizer, new plastic, and expensive coffee. Engineers in white coats hurried past glass rooms filled with monitors and prototype equipment. No one welcomed him. Some stared at his boots. Some stared at the tattoo near his wrist. Stay gentle. He kept his hands at his sides and followed Claire's assistant down a corridor lined with framed patents and photographs of smiling children wearing early vision devices. At the end of the hall, Claire stood outside Laboratory 3, her cane in one hand, her face calm, but her jaw set with the kind of resolve Ethan recognized from people who had been pushed too far and had decided to stop stepping backward. Mr. Walker, she said, I heard what you said downstairs. Ethan lowered his eyes. I meant every word. Before Claire could answer, a sharp alarm sounded inside the lab. not loud enough to panic anyone, but urgent enough to turn every head. A senior engineer rushed through the door, holding a tablet. The pediatric guidance array is down again. The sensor bridge is reading unstable voltage. We cannot run the board demonstration. Richard appeared behind Claire as if the alarm had been waiting for him. Convenient, he said smoothly. The one project you insisted on protecting fails on the morning of the vote. Claire turned toward the engineer. Can it be repaired? The man hesitated. Not before the demonstration. We need a full diagnostic. Maybe 6 hours. You have 40 minutes, Richard said, almost pleasantly. The lab fell into a heavy silence. Through the glass, Ethan could see a small device resting on a padded workbench, a lightweight headset designed for children with partial vision loss, surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and a power unit blinking red. He did not step forward at first. He was not an engineer in their eyes. He was a mechanic with grease in the lines of his palms. But machines have a language, and Ethan had spent 20 years listening. He listened now. The hum was wrong. Not dead. Strained. Like a starter motor fighting a bad ground. That sound, he said quietly. Several people looked at him as if a broom had started giving financial advice. Richard gave a soft laugh. Please do not tell me the mechanic has thoughts. Ethan did not answer him. He looked at Claire. May I ask one question? Claire nodded. Ask. Ethan pointed toward the bench. Did anyone replace that power module this morning? The senior engineer blinked. Yes. During calibration. The sensor is not failing, Ethan said. It is starving. You have current, but not clean current. Something is wired in reverse or grounded wrong. A younger technician frowned, then checked the tablet again. That is not impossible. Richard's voice sharpened. This is absurd. Claire lifted one hand. Give him a screwdriver. No one moved. Then the youngest technician opened a drawer and handed Ethan a small insulated screwdriver. Ethan stepped into the lab slowly, like a man entering a church where he had not been invited but still knew how to kneel. He did not boast. He did not rush. He removed the back panel, traced one wire with his finger, checked the connector, then paused. There, he said. The polarity marking is hidden under the clamp. Whoever seeded this followed the label on the casing, but the replacement module is flipped. The technician leaned closer. His face changed. He is right. For 12 quiet minutes, the only sounds were the soft turn of screws, the click of a reseated connector, and Claire's measured breathing beyond the glass. Then Ethan stepped back. The red light blinked once, twice, and turned green. The headset powered on with a gentle rising tone. Across the lab, every voice disappeared. Claire heard the tone and closed her eyes. Richard said nothing. Ethan set the screwdriver down as if it had never belonged to him and looked through the glass at Claire. It should hold now, he said. And for the first time that day, the room saw him not as a mistake in work boots, but as a man who had quietly saved what everyone else was ready to bury. The green light should have ended the argument, but pride rarely surrenders just because truth has entered the room. Richard Vance stepped closer to the lab glass, his polished shoes making no sound on the white floor, his face arranged into something almost calm. Remarkable timing, he said. A public scandal, a surprise visit, a dramatic repair, and now we are supposed to believe this man simply wandered into the most sensitive development floor in the company and saved the day. The engineers looked away. The young technician who had handed Ethan the screwdriver opened his mouth, then closed it. Fear has a way of teaching good people to become quiet before they ever become cruel. Ethan wiped his hands on a paper shop towel and stepped out of Laboratory 3. He did not look offended. He looked tired. I did not come here for this, he said. Richard smiled. No, you came here for money. Claire's head turned slightly toward him. Be very careful. I am being careful, Richard said, lifting a folder from the conference table. Careful enough to review a payment trail that appeared this morning. $5,000 transferred to an account connected to Ethan Walker, routed through a private vendor used by your office. The air changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just colder. Ethan stared at him. I never received $5,000 from anyone. Richard opened the folder and slid printed pages across the table. That is what men say when the first lie fails. Claire stood still, her cane resting lightly against her leg. Read me the vendor name. Her assistant picked up the page, voice uncertain. Northline Access Consulting. Claire's face hardened. That vendor was suspended last quarter. Richard's tone stayed smooth. Then perhaps your office is less organized than you believe. The board members began arriving, summoned early by Richard's messages, each carrying tablets, concern, and the familiar caution of people who prefer a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. Within minutes, Ethan was standing at the edge of the executive boardroom, surrounded by glass walls, city light, and judgment. He could have left. A proud man might have. A frightened man certainly would have. But through the open doorway, near the reception chairs, he saw Maddie sitting with Claire's assistant, holding her drawing against her chest. She had been brought from the hospital for paperwork, still wearing her yellow sweater, still too small for the storm grown-ups had built around her. She lifted one hand and gave him a tiny wave. Ethan's heart nearly broke from the weight of it. Claire heard the silence in him. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, then at Maddie, then at the board members who saw a mechanic before they saw a father. "Because my daughter thinks you are brave," he said. "I would hate to make her wrong." No one laughed. Richard's smile finally lost its shape. Claire took one slow step toward the head of the table. "Then we do this properly," she said. "Open the full accounting log. Pull the building cameras. Retrieve the vendor authorization records. Every signature, every timestamp, every access badge." One board member shifted uncomfortably. "Claire, that could expose internal failures." She turned toward his voice. "Good. Truth often does." Richard leaned in, his voice low. "You are making a mistake." Claire did not flinch. "No, Richard. I made one already. I let you mistake my patience for blindness." The room settled into a silence so complete that even the city beyond the windows seemed far away. Ethan stood with his worn boots planted on the expensive carpet. Maddie watched from the hallway, and Claire Whitmore placed one hand on the boardroom table as if claiming not just the company, but herself. For the first time, the trap Richard had built began to close around the man who set it. The boardroom screen flickered to life, and for one breath, everyone forgot how to pretend. Claire stood at the head of the table with her hand resting on the polished walnut surface, listening as her assistant guided the first file open. "Authorization records," the assistant said, her voice careful. "Northline Access Consulting was reactivated yesterday at 6:42 in the evening." A board member leaned forward. "By whose office?" The assistant swallowed. "Executive Strategy Division." Every eye moved toward Richard. He did not blink. "That division has multiple users." Claire nodded once. "Then open the badge records." The room became a place of small sounds, tapping keys, shifting chairs, quiet breaths held too long. Ethan remained near the wall, hands folded in front of him, his work boots planted on carpet that probably cost more than his truck. Maddie sat just outside the glass with her drawing pressed to her chest, watching adults learn that truth does not need a fancy suit to enter a room. The badge log appeared. One entry glowed under the timestamp, 6:39 in the evening, Richard Vance, Restricted Finance Terminal. Another file opened. A camera angle from the executive floor showed Richard entering the private records room with a folder under his arm and leaving without it. His face on the screen was smooth, confident, unaware that tomorrow would remember him. Richard gave a small laugh. "Too late and too thin. This proves nothing except that I worked late." Claire turned her face toward him. "Then the payment trail will be innocent." The forensic accountant on the call, a quiet woman from compliance, cleared her throat through the speaker. The $5,000 transfer never reached Mr. Walker. It was routed to a dormant account opened under a similar name, then flagged for media distribution through an outside public relations contact. The silence changed shape. It was no longer confusion. It was recognition. Richard's jaw tightened. "You are all letting sentiment cloud procedure." Ethan finally spoke, not loud, not angry. "My daughter needed help. You tried to turn that into shame." The words landed harder because he did not decorate them. Claire reached for Maddie's drawing, which her assistant placed gently in her hand. Her fingertips moved across the raised crayon lines Maddie had pressed deeply into the paper, yellow lines around a woman standing in a gray room. Claire lifted her head. "For 3 years, some of you have spoken about me as if my disability made me temporary. You called it concern. You called it transition planning. You called it responsible leadership." No one answered. But concern does not forge documents. Concern does not sabotage a pediatric vision device. Concern does not humiliate a father and a sick child to win a vote. Richard stood. "Claire, enough." She turned directly toward his voice. No, Richard. Enough was the moment you confused my patience with permission. The board chair, an older woman with silver hair and a stunned expression, looked down at the records, then back up. Mr. Vance, pending formal investigation, you are suspended from all duties effective immediately. Richard opened his mouth, but no polished sentence came out. That was the first honest thing he had offered all day. Claire faced the room again, her cane beside her, her shoulders straight, her voice steady. You called me blind because I could not see your faces clearly. But I saw the fear. I saw the greed. And I saw the man you tried to destroy because he had something this room almost forgot to value: character. Ethan looked down, overwhelmed by the quiet respect now moving toward him from people who had dismissed him an hour earlier. Claire turned toward him, and the room seemed to hold its breath. You made a joke last night, she said softly. You thought I was your mistake. Ethan shook his head. I thought I had hurt you. Claire smiled then, not like a chief executive officer winning a vote, but like a woman stepping out of a locked room. You were wrong about one thing, Ethan Walker. I was not your mistake. I was your second chance. The room did not erupt after Richard was suspended. There was no applause loud enough to erase what had happened, no easy sentence that could make humiliation disappear. The silence stayed, but it had changed. It was no longer the silence that follows cruelty. It was the silence that follows truth, when everyone in the room understands that a quiet person has carried more dignity than the powerful people judging him. Ethan Walker stood near the glass wall, unsure what to do with the respect now turning toward him. A board member approached and offered an apology. Another promised a public correction. The compliance officer began securing the records for investigation. Claire listened to each voice, accepted each fact, and then did the one thing no one expected. She asked them to wait. She turned toward the hallway and said, Maddie, sweetheart, may I hear your drawing again? Maddie stepped into the boardroom slowly, her yellow sweater bright against all that gray glass and polished wood. Ethan started toward her, but Claire lifted a gentle hand. Let her come as herself, she said. Maddie walked to the head of the table and placed the crayon drawing in front of Claire. Her voice shook a little, but she read the picture like it was a promise. This is a lady in a room where people forgot how to listen. The yellow lines are her words. The man with big shoulders is my dad, because he fixes things even when he says he is only trying. And this part is me, waiting for the light to come back. No one moved. Claire pressed her fingertips to the paper, and this time she did not hide the tears that gathered behind her tinted glasses. She did not need to. Strength had never meant being untouched. It meant staying kind after being misunderstood. 2 weeks later, Mercy Children's Hospital called Ethan before sunrise. Maddie's treatment had been approved through the newly restored Pediatric Access Program, not as a favor, not as a secret gift, but as the first official case under a fund Claire created with full board approval. Ethan read every document. Claire insisted on that. She would not let him feel bought, and he would not let her feel used. That was how trust began between them, not with fireworks, but with paperwork, honesty, and two wounded adults learning to stand in the same room without fear. Maddie's procedure was not a fairy tale cure wrapped in bright music. It was careful, slow, and filled with follow-up visits, eye drops, checkups, and brave mornings when she squeezed her father's hand too tightly. Claire came when invited. She sat in waiting rooms without making herself important. She brought audiobooks, a soft blanket, and once, a terrible homemade sandwich that made Maddie laugh so hard the nurse smiled from the doorway. Months passed. Ethan kept working at the garage. Claire kept leading Whitmore Medical Systems. Richard faced the consequences of his choices through formal investigation and public accountability, but Ethan never celebrated his fall. He simply told Maddie, "We do not have to hate people to be free from them." One quiet Friday evening, they returned to the Bellamy Grand, not for business, not for scandal, but because Maddie wanted to see where the grown-ups stopped being silly. The same golden lights warmed the bar. The same marble counter shone under soft music. But this time, no one laughed from the corners. Ethan sat beside Claire while Maddie curled up in a lounge chair with her sketchbook, already drawing 3 figures beneath a sky full of yellow stars. Claire turned toward Ethan's voice. "Do you still believe in blind dates?" Ethan looked at his daughter, then at the woman who had not saved him by making him rich, but by helping him remember that accepting grace did not make him weak. No, he said softly. I believe some people are sent before we know how badly we need them. Claire smiled, and this time Ethan did not look away. Outside, the city moved on, loud and busy and imperfect. Inside, three people sat together in a peace they had earned slowly. Maddie kept drawing. Claire kept listening. Ethan rested his tired hands on the table, the tattoo on his wrist visible beneath the warm light. Stay gentle. And for once, the world did not ask him to prove his worth. It simply let him be seen.